your host, Ralph Newell, and today we have as our special guest Ms. Sophie Nguyen, Senior Policy Manager in the Education Policy Program at New America. Welcome, Sophie.
Hi, Ralph. Thanks for having me.
We are in a polarizing period in American history. Today would actually be an understatement, at least in my lifetime, with the current attacks we've had on DEI and higher education. They are unprecedented. So today we want to talk to Sophie about the varying degrees 2025 Americans find common ground in higher education. This was a report that was released by Sophie's organization, New America. Sophie, can you tell us, just before we get started, so that our audience knows and actually help enlighten me as well, can you tell us a little bit more about the history of New America and what you guys are about?
New America is a think tank based in Washington, D.C. We have been around since, I believe, 1999. I think we will have our I think 25th anniversary this year. As a big organizations, we work on a variety of issues, providing like policy analysis, also advocacy on a variety of issues such as the domestic policy, like related to like children and family, part of the educations program. So we do educations policy all the ways like from early childhood all the ways to higher education and workforce development. We also
Mhm.
have a team that focus on like, technology and data privacy issues as part of the organizations. The team that I'm on, like I said, like the higher ed team is part of the education policy programs. The higher ed team, we work, our work focus on student focus solutions to deal with issues around affordability, student loans, or higher education accountability, like how to hold college accountable for student outcomes. A part of our work is also the public opinion work, like the varying degree survey that Ralph just mentioned, as a part of like learning how the public and how students perceive higher ed and experience higher education in their daily life.
Can you tell us a little bit about, your background and how you have become involved in higher education policy and research?
So I actually started New America as an intern right after college.
Okay.
I have been here, I would say it's already been 8 years now. I went to a small liberal arts college in Massachusetts, women's college. I don't know if you guys know Mahoya College.
Oh yeah, we know.
It was an amazing experience. Like I would still say that so bad as is, this was still one of the best years in my life. I had such a transformative experience there. And when I was in my senior years, yeah, as a senior, you start looking for jobs because the next year you're out of school.
Hmm.
I started to think about what I want to do. I was an econ major then, but I didn't feel like I didn't feel like I would like to go into the couple pathway that like available for like an econ majors, like finance, banking, or business. I didn't feel like that was my calling at all. And then I was just like reflected on my time during college, and I just realized how amazing it was for me, how much I have learned, and how grateful I was that such an opportunity was made available for me. And I think about because there's a questions that pop up in my head that like, why don't I do something, work in something that help more people
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
access, like experience the same kind of higher education that I had. So that yeah, they have the chance to like just to like also like love great things also like feel experiencing that can potentially change their life. So that's why I started looking into like work in college access and success. And
Hmm.
I came across New America, like they was hiring for an intern then, and that's primarily gonna do like research, and like that's how I got like long story short, that's how I got my foot in the door with higher ed policy. And I would say I started not having any experience on like content knowledge in higher ed, but also in federal policy. And working in policies actually became an advantage for me at that time because I caught up to speed very quickly as to learning about the holistic issues with higher education in the US. Learning about like the issue with like different population of students, also different sectors of higher education. And it's been 8 years and I'm still here.
Guys, I felt for a second there, I felt like I was talking to my to my own daughter there. She graduated with an econ degree from William and Mary and was like, I don't know if I really want to go into finance. And she's
Uh-huh.
actually doing research right now before instructional research at a university before she goes into her PhD. But yeah, it's like I had part of that same conversation already. Just from where you're sitting right now, and in this time that you've been at New America, how do you believe the work you've done so far? How has it impacted higher education policy and practice so far? What are some of the key outcomes that you're proud of?
That is a very big question, Raf. From my own perspective, thinking about the work that I have done, actually, like throughout my time at New America, I've been involved in a lot of projects in terms of like different areas of research as well, like accountability, financial aid, student loans, and now with the public opinion work. Thinking about impact, it's like thinking about impacting for whom and how impactful it is. It's for policy. For policy takes time to
Hmm.
happen. I know we know when it happens, it can have immeasurable impacts on the life of a lot of students, but that process takes time. And even when it happens, it will take time for us to actually learn about the impact of it, so to measure it, to gather the data and to learn about the impact. I would say 8 years is a long time, but at the same time, like during those my 8 years with New America, like working in higher policy. A lot of that what we call unprecedented thing has also happened to higher education, and higher education has transformed a lot, experienced a
Hmm.
lot in the past 8 years, right? Thinking about the pandemic in 2020, when suddenly institutions across the country have to adopt like online learning quickly and have to like learn how to do so very effectively. And then thinking about and also like how they not just like in terms of like instructions, but in terms of like how they instructing like how they supporting students like during that very also very disruptive time with students as well. And also like thinking about like how they navigating about a lot of how they navigating a lot of the challenges they facing with the administrations, the funding cut, policy changes regarding international enrollment. I actually like not in terms of any particular work, but I realized that I actually find out like higher ed is actually a very nimble, and even though like there has been criticisms that is it's very slow to change and
Hmm.
adapt, but like I think during my time learning about the sector has a chance to talk to a couple of presidents, like there's institutions that prove that they can adapt, they
Hmm.
can grow, they can deal with the challenges that they face with and still like support the students in the meantime. Yeah, like I think I'm just like proud to actually be able to see that, to witness that. There's a lot of not very positive news about the sector right now. The public confidence for the sector is way down, and I'm sure we go into that later. But at the same time, I also see that institutions still very much care. There's a lot of bad actors that what
Hmm.
we learn
Hmm.
about in our work too. But there's a lot of institutions that still very much care about the student outcomes and want to do the best they can to support their students. Um, and yeah, like that's give me hope and faith and motivations to continue to do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, later is now, so let's get into that that polarization that I talked
Mhm.
about earlier, and you're talking about now. Um, so when you think about the current political climate and how it has influenced public perception public perception of higher education. What role do you believe that the higher education institutions need to play in bridging these divides?
First of all, before I answer your questions, I
Uh-huh.
think we have to the political device and the public confidence, or like the fact that the public is unhappy with the
Mm-hmm.
with like higher ed, or like the colleges and universities. Like it has been an issue that has been happening for quite a while. It's not something that is just like an event, or that is happening this year following what happened like the first half of this year. No, it was criticism against higher ed, like about like the cost of it, about like all criticism from, especially from like conservative, that like higher ed is just too liberal or too left leaning, has been in the conversations for like, I think as long as I remember I was still in college, or like I
Mm-hmm.
believe it started even before that. Um, but I think a lot of college, and for a long time I don't think that colleges and university has been having a very effective response to
Mm-hmm.
those narrative or to those sentiment, because like the truth is like we also fight with our data. Even when a majority of Americans are not happy with higher education, they still believe that a majority of them still believe that it has a good return on investment, and like yeah, like 70% of them still want to send their children to some sort of higher education, whether it's like certificate program or associate degree or bachelor degree. Like we see, like even when the public is not happy, there's still a demand for it. And
Mm-hmm.
for a long time, I don't think there has been an effective response from the sectors, from colleges and universities, to all the criticism against
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
um, we only see the urgency coming up recently, given what happened in the first half this year, is like all like constant um like challenges, like threat of funding cut, program review, and see like what happened with like very elite colleges in the country like Columbia or Harvard, that like I think that colleges started to feel that urgency, that they need to actually connect with the public and like really redefine the image of who they are and what they actually do. Because for a long time, I think that conversation has not happened. And as we see, like issues still remain. And we see that it comes to this point of like this year that when there's like a threat of funding cut, that, oh, this is really probable threat of funding cut, colleges have to like, oh, now we have to do this, to start these conversations of explaining who we are, rather than like cast ourselves as elite or like as exclusive. To answer your questions, I think colleges and university play a tremendous role, if not a very direct role, in creating, defining this narrative about higher education, like changing the current narrative about them. And obviously, yeah, like when we talk about narrative of higher education, there's a role for the media to play. But I think colleges themselves has to be able to do that well as well. And I don't think they have been doing a lot of that effectively
Mm-hmm.
in the past year.
The survey that you guys did or are doing, obviously it's very timely right now, but it wasn't like you just decided to do that this year in reaction. This was actually the ninth year that you've been doing the survey, and so
Mm-hmm.
you've been there for 8 years, you were saying earlier. So I'm not sure if you've been part of the survey for the full 8 years that you've been there.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the results that you got this year, it'd be interesting to see what this says next year. How people, I mean, because it was I would say feelings of how things are going, especially as relate to education, were
Mm-hmm.
not as formed today as they were in March, I believe it was when you guys got your
Mm-hmm.
responses.
Yeah.
But before we get into this year's results, what trends were you seeing over the past 9 years, the first 8 years that you guys are doing this
Mhm.
to the results that you got this year? If you can, just for everybody, because obviously I've read this, but if you can highlight for them, what were, some of the key areas that you guys discovered, and then we can sort
Mhm.
of talk
Okay.
about how it's changed from
Of
there.
course. So varying degree is a nationally representative surveys about higher educations. The survey, we asked the general public, so more like American adults, 18 years and above, about like um, a variety, like their thought on a variety of issues in higher education, like from values, like whether they think higher ed is worth it, or like issues about like funding for higher ed, who should be responsible for funding higher ed, to issues about like accountabilities. Sometimes we ask like issues about affordability and like about like the use of AI in higher ed, which is like seem like a very prominent issues right now.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like you said, we have been conducted the survey since 2017. 2017 was the only year that I did not work on varying degree. I have been involved in it for the past 8 years that I was at New America. So yeah. So it's also feel like my baby as well. Uh
Mm-hmm.
but so yeah, like so the core so throughout the 8 years we retain we there's a group of questions that we ask years over years, so just to learn um how Americans' opinion has changed about higher educations. Like, so those questions, like, such as like about like mostly related to values and in funding for higher education, such as questions like, do you agree or disagree that higher education is still as can still bring the return on investments for the students, or like do people think like higher ed is fine how it is? And like, yeah, to answer your questions about what we find as the trend before we going into this year's survey is that actually I think if you look at public opinions research, you would find that most of the time like people opinion is actually pretty stable.
Mm-hmm.
Like yeah, throughout years, like we find that like especially like on questions about like values and funding for higher ed, we find that like yeah, like from like 2017 to now, on questions such as like yeah, whether higher ed is fine how it is, like a majority of even though there's some fluctuations within a particular year, like the number of people that think that Americans is that think that higher education is fine how it is never go more than 40%, which mean that like throughout the years, a majority of Americans has not been happy with how higher ed is. At the same time, um, we find that like when it comes to asking about the valuations of colleges and the university, whether they are worth it, a
Mm-hmm.
majority of Americans, like more than 70%, think that like higher ed would still bring about the return on investments for students. Having said that, we also notice a declining like that like trend of like the number of people think agree that higher ed is still worth the return on investment. We notice a slight declining trend from like trend, I think from 2018 when we asked the questions for the first time. So even the decline, it's not like a very sharp decline. We do notice
Mm-hmm.
like the number changed by a couple percentage point year by year. Um, and that's worth bringing out because even though like a very strong percentage of higher of the public still think that higher ed is worth a return on investment, we might have to wonder like as to why there's a declining trend and whether that will keep will continue moving forward. Consider if there's nothing changed about like the policy, if there's nothing changed about reasons that why Americans that directly target um, or deal with the issues that make Americans not happy with higher education.
Right. When I looked at the survey results, the first thing I found interesting was that you divided respondents into basically two camps, Democrats versus Republicans, which, I guess I could somewhat argue that contributes to this divisiveness that we have. But
Mhm.
I want to ask the question of, when you guys segregate the data,
Mhm.
do you look at it from the standpoint? Do you also have data that speaks to how people responded to those questions based upon education level, class, geography, and things
Mhm.
like that? And do the answers still hold, the same way when you look at those groups? So I was just wondering why you guys chose to segment them by political party.
That's a very great question. So with varying degrees, you can actually break it down by 13 different demographic groups.
Hmm.
Political idea, Democrat and Republicans is one. We also you can look at the responses broken down by like generation, Gen Z, millennials, Gen X,
Hmm.
boomers, or like race and ethnicity, or like educational attainment.
Hmm.
The reasons we choose to write our narrative focusing on Democrat and Republican. I have to say that even for like political affiliations, we do collect data if people are identify themselves as independent or
Hmm.
none of the party. We don't just like break down the group by break down our sample just by Democrat or Republican.
Right.
But for the narrative of the survey, we decided to focus on um, Democrat and Republican because that is usually those are this is these are the group that we see the most interesting like difference in responses
Hmm.
or not difference like some gaps are very interesting and also like there's a questions that we expect we will see gap in response between the Democrat and Republicans, but like yeah, like actually they pretty alike. So like we
Hmm.
see a lot of like um interesting interactions between the all like responses among these two groups. And also is we in the policy space is also where the policy conversations is headed right now when it comes to
Hmm.
higher educations to be able to say that certain percent make the case that certain like oh actually certain percent of like Republicans still like support this or like support more funding for higher ed to make it more affordable is like a very important fighting that we want to elevate in this policy moment. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's why the narrative is written that way that make it seems like it's just about like Democrat and Republicans, but now our data it can be looked into um, in a much more comprehensive way than just political affiliation.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to, ask you some more questions as it relates to the two parties. But one other quick question about the data that I had as I was reading it that was begging for me, and I really was just thinking anecdotally of how what these answers were saying, and
Mhm.
then thinking about people that I know, people that I've talked to. And again, this is just very anecdotal, but I find the answers to some of these things, especially as relates to colleges and universities going or not going, looking at affordability, especially when you start talking about student loans and who should pay for it, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. I do find the answers or responses I get from people or hear from people are, I don't want to say completely different, but they are
Mhm.
different
Mhm.
when the person is college educated versus not
Mhm.
being college
Mhm.
educated. When you in your respondents, do you look at that? Do you break it out like that to see what does a person who went to college think versus the person who did not?
We do see some of those differences in
Uh,
our responses in terms of like how they perceive like certain values around college,
mm-hmm,
like the role of college, what college should do, what college should provide to students or society. I would say we see some difference between people who like didn't have any post-secondary credential at all
mm-hmm,
versus though with some credentials, like whether
mm-hmm,
it's like a certificate or associate degree or bachelor degree. I would say the in terms of like comparing the differences, like whether it's like the most it's more significant or not. Like I would
mm-hmm.
think the political lie, the political affiliations, it differences are much clearer and much
Gotcha.
more consistent in the way that yeah like that can provide us a clear narrative for the surveys for the findings of our surveys.
Mm-hmm,
In terms of like one more thing I would say about educational attainment, the differences in educational attainment, it matters a lot when you do that, like look at educational attainment and interactions in interaction with other demographic as well, such as race, like someone with college educated white persons would like maybe have a very completely different opinion of higher ed compared to like a black person without a college degree. So like
mm-hmm.
that is something like if we I think if that is like for like any researcher out there if if that is an area that you are interested in looking into, I think you will find much more nuanced findings when you do that, like interactions between college attainment level and race,
Yeah.
rather
And
than just yeah college attainment alone.
yeah, right. As opposed
Mm,
to just looking at it politically. And
yeah.
and bingo, that was exactly what I was thinking when I just started thinking anecdotally about,
Mm,
looking at the questions that you guys were asking, and these are the same questions that I have heard or brought up or, been a part of in different conversations over the years. And again, I'm generalizing, but thinking
mm,
about the
yeah.
responses, and they are different from different racial groups, different
Mhm,
class of people,
mhm.
location, it's interesting.
Yeah,
So, but
and
anyway, you guys decided to look at it from the political side of it,
mhm,
Democrat and
mhm,
Republicans.
mhm,
So when there were a lot of similarities, and honestly, I don't want to say I was surprised. I wasn't
mhm,
surprised, but
mhm,
I think my interest was very much piqued in how close we were, if you will, when you look at two parties that of how we as Americans were on the same page with a lot of this stuff. Where the government appears to be right now when it comes to funding, they seem to wanting to do less funding for higher ed. But given the results of your survey, it appears to be that there is bipartisan support for more federal investment in higher education. What seems to be the disconnect between the people and what's actually going on the Hill? How can you leverage this
mhm.
support
I
that the people have?
Yeah, I would like to clarify that, like for the questions that we asked on
Hmm.
like funding, we specifically asked the question, like phrase the questions in terms like making it focused on like affordability issues only,
Hmm.
like not
Hmm.
just funding for higher education in like like in just in general, but like
Right, right.
funding for
Yeah.
higher ed to make it more affordable, like that's where we see a lot
Hmm.
of support
Hmm.
um among Democrat and also Republican, even though there's this also a gap between
A gap. Yeah.
like how they answer the questions, between Democrat and Republican on that. But yeah, we still have like a majority of Republicans like yeah said that they would like to see higher to see the federal and the state government fund provide more investment to make higher ed more affordable. I would say though, those are the findings that we have, and we have been trying to elevate those messages. But at the same time, policy making in Congress don't necessarily gonna just happen in the wave of like what the public opinions want, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yeah, and even though like yeah, we will still continue to like advocate for it, but I would like considering the policy movement right now when like yeah in the administrations there's a huge movement of cutting expenses, cutting costs, cutting funding for a lot of the area of the government, also mostly particularly for educations. Not just like higher ed, but like yeah, education in general, we see like there has been a strong cut, like a significant cut, like with for the Department of Education's like present budget, zero out a lot of like program support program for my like for minor for like institutions, especially minority institution. They just like announced I think a couple weeks ago that
Hmm.
or like you know maybe just last week, oh yeah, a couple weeks ago that they would like redirect or like would just defund like those investment program for minority institutions that's supposed to like enhance their capacity, helping them um serve their student better. Like it's just very hard to make the case for like why, not that it's very hard to make the case for why like funding for those institutions or like funding to make higher ed more affordable. We can always make that case and we have the data to back it up, but it's even more challenging for those narrative to be heard, now, just given the policy context that we are in, when yeah, like we had just have the administration just want to just redirect funding from away from higher education, away from research, and and yeah, so um I yeah, it's like we will continue to do our job of like yeah, like looking at these data, elevating the outcome, finding the elevating solution that works for students. But I guess until like policy direction change,
Hmm.
like with the administrations, or we would still continue to argue for it. But yeah, like I think the and colleges themselves has also to play a role, like important role here of like explaining why is this funding matters to them in order to serve their student, finding the language that would resonate with the current administration in terms of like the like strength, like why like these funding matters, because we need to train students to prepare them for the workforce, right? For a stronger economy, like five like connections point languages that would resonate with the current administration's policy. It's very important just to get their ears and support on like on the issues that we care about, even when like the data itself is important to have, but that at the same time we have to also be able to make the case that will be working effectively with the current administration, considering the policy context that we are in.
One of the things that in your survey that came out was there was a dissatisfaction with the current state of higher education. And I think I know exactly what the question is, but it was, do we think everything is fine? I'm not
Mm,
exactly sure how you guys define fine. If you ask me if anything is fine, I probably would tell you no, because I think we can improve everything. You know what I mean?
mhm,
So I don't want to say it's a loaded question, but
mm,
there obviously is a dissatisfaction, though. I think,
yeah.
I think most would agree with that. But so, what are the key factors that you guys think are contributing to this perception that higher ed is not fine?
So in terms of how we define fine. We didn't. We asked the questions and let people perceive it how they would like it to be. It's more about
Mhm.
like, the perceptions, their own
Mhm.
perceptions, how they view fine. Like you said, nothing is fine, but well, people also
Yeah,
have different perceptions or like definitions of what fine mean to them. So that's
exactly.
how
Yeah.
we let it up to people to define it for themselves. In terms of where's the dissatisfactions come from, we also see it's from our surveys, also from other public opinion work that have been done in the field. Throughout the years that we conduct this survey, cost has been like a consistently on top of mind of like of force as to why they think higher ed is not fine the way it is. Like people, they only half of the people in our survey said that they think American can access high quality higher education that is also affordable. I think 66% said that like list cost are the reason why students cannot like decide to stop out, cannot continue with their educations. So cost is a huge issue, but at the same time, we also see that this doesn't come directly from our surveys, but around the same time that we published the survey this year in July, like another survey conducted by Gallup and the Lamina Foundations also like came out looking at like very similar issues about public confidence for higher ed.
Mhm.
This year they actually find public confidence like rise actually increase compared to the year before, which is surprising. But that is like what is notable about that survey is that they also ask people as to like the reason why they have more confidence or lower confidence for higher ed. And like one of the top reasons for why they have lower confidence for higher ed is a lot of people mentions the political ideology leaning of the college. Like yeah, like people mentioned issues like yeah, like college like be considered like liberal or too left leaning. And also like another issue is that people don't think that college is like teaching the right thing. Um, for students are like they not like they don't focus like they don't prepare students with the relevant skill that they need. So like those are like in that survey, those are the top are the reasons that come to the top as to why people say they have lower confidence for higher education. But at the same time, on the point about whether colleges political and more liberal or like left leaning, like in our surveys we actually find that those are like the opinions on colleges political climate or political leaning is actually more mixed than we would think. Even though like that's also part of the criticism, like a huge part of the criticism against higher education that we have been hearing over and over again. We see that like only a slight majority, like I think around like 56 of Americans think that colleges are um or like when it comes to like individual viewpoint, colleges are a lot more welcoming toward liberal views. Um, and um, and like and when we ask like when it comes to like whether colleges are exposing students to different ideas or like imposing their own idea on students, we actually see that Americans are very split on that questions. Even when I would say it seems that the narrative about colleges political leaning or political climate has been dominating conversations about higher ed recently.
Mhm.
Like it doesn't mean that a majority that out of Americans believe that like colleges like indoctrinating students or that colleges are just like too liberal, but like there are more mixed or split responses in those areas when we look are like more nuances in how Americans think about like the issues with political ideology living on campus.
Yeah, these perceptions are strong. When you look, across the landscape globally,
Mm.
if you look at anybody's survey where they say what are the top 30 institutions, 25 institutions in the world, anywhere between 80-85% of them are going to be American colleges and universities.
Yeah.
And I was just at a higher ed conference in Australia, maybe just 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was talking with, some graduate students as well as, seasoned faculty folks who perception of America in higher ed was very negative.
Mm.
Um,
Did they say
about
why they think it's negative?
um freedom of speech.
Mm.
Um, Freedom of speech was one. The political side of, going here and learning at your own pace,
Mm-hmm.
or teaching there was fear in that because, again, we're getting very political here and in the weeds, but of like, if I'm a student, my visa is only going to be for 3 years and they're not going to renew it. So I won't be able
Mm-hmm.
to finish my degree. So I'm going to have to
Mm-hmm.
go somewhere else. Um, you know, Not being able to learn from the best and the brightest because people aren't able to say things. I mean, it was interesting getting these
Mm-hmm.
perceptions,
Mm-hmm.
and how much of that was the reality on campus. I don't know, but
Mm-hmm.
that's just a perception, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And so, gosh, I mean, we're really towards the end of time here. There's just so many questions that I didn't get to ask you. But one that just piggybacking on what I was just saying is, you know, I want to talk about public trust. So, what is the public confidence in higher education? Has declined, I guess, in recent years. So, do you guys have any strategies, or do you have any strategies that institutes can adopt to help rebuild
Mm-hmm.
that trust
Mm-hmm.
and demonstrate that their
Mm-hmm.
value to
Mm-hmm.
our society?
Before I answer your questions, can I say something
Yeah, yeah,
to
absolutely.
respond to like what you just shared before? I would say though, a lot of those perceptions about higher education or the narrative about higher education, what it is, unfortunately now it's being very influenced by what happened at the very top institutions. Like
Hmm.
like the Columbia, the Harvard kind of institutions, the Ivy League like the ivory tower of high ed, even
Right,
when like they actually serve a very small share of students that's
exactly.
going that are like considering the undergraduate or graduate population in the US
No,
today.
you're dead on
uh,
it.
yeah,
I yeah.
and yeah, we have 6,000 institutions, like 2 years, 4 year, public, private,
Hmm.
for profit, like private, nonprofit, private for profit. But when it comes to higher ed, like always, most of the thing, not the narrative that we heard about are like not the college that close to you, or in your hometown, but it's just always the Harvard, Yale, the Brown, the Columbia, and
Right, 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 right.
as if like in any story that comes out from those institutions, even like it, even when they very unique, they just become the representative story of higher education as a whole. And unfortunately, that's just like I can also influence how people view higher ed in the US. Not just like,
Hmm.
yeah, like you in an international conference, but I believe like it's influence how the like American public feel about higher ed as well. Like even though like yeah, like we see like we do have questions, like we do when we see that without the questions we ask, like if people think college and university have positive effect or negative effect on the way where things are going in the country. And just like general like college and university, and then versus like the questions where we ask like whether you think a college and or university near you have positive or negative effect on the way things are going in the country. Guess what? Like the share of people who say positive is
Hmm.
almost always higher for like when it's the questions about like colleges need them versus the
Right.
colleges in general. So which means that the yeah, like whatever current generic narrative we have about higher education may not really represent of like what people really think of like certain colleges and
Hmm.
university, and
Hmm.
like those narrative itself is not necessarily representative of like higher education in the country as a whole.
Right.
But well, it's just happened to be the story, the big story,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
why everyone heard about it. But yeah, to answer your questions about what colleges and university can do, like there's no questions that they really need to look at the problem and the source of dissatisfactions and actually have clear solution or clear strategies on how to deal with the issues that make people so dissatisfied with higher educations. For example, cost. Is there
Hmm.
anything they can do about cost that like help students family pay for college, especially middle and low income students, to shoulder the
Hmm.
cost of college without them taking out more loans to enroll, whether they can like the support that they give to student, whether student can access those support, whether there's support available on campus to help student navigate college and help them graduate. Like providing the services a student needs, such as like a lot of students would like be interested in like career services, whether they doing that or whether student able to access those services to help them graduate, but also like help them like land a job right after completions. And then like I think like what we've seen on the news recently, like the issues of like yeah, free speech, whether
Hmm.
colleges indoctrinating students or like actually like provide a welcoming space for like exploration of different ideas. Yeah, like again, I don't think the story at Columbia or Harvard would represent the story of how free speech is happening on all colleges campus. But yeah, like I think there has to be a narrative change, like
Hmm.
definitely first action taken, and also narrative like change about a lot of time the public is not aware of what's happening on college campus now. So like I think colleges and university now need to be more active in telling those story, what they actually do, how they actually help students, how how they actually help and support students, and to be able to and like, yeah, and what they use their research funding for like issues like that. So to just like be more transparent and to be able to like when once they're able to do that, you know, they hopefully they can regain public trust and public confidence.
Yeah. Sophie, gosh, like I said, we just ran out of time. There was just so much more I wanted to ask you about this survey. But I think if folks can access the survey and read the results, I think they will come away with a lot of questions and comments, and I don't want to say concerns, I guess, just thoughts.
Mhm.
So if you could share with people how they can get a copy of the survey or see it, read it, can you let,
Mhm.
let the audience know?
Yeah, you can find Varying Degrees 2025 when you log on to newamerica.org, org. I mean, I think I can share the link with you to like hopefully you can put it up there. But yeah, like it's yeah, if you go to newamerica.org and search for Varying Degree 2025 or just search Varying Degree 2025 on Google, it will show up. Uh yeah,
Yeah, no,
that's
it's
the
very informative, very enlightening. Again, I think a lot of people you hear out there talk about we have more in common than what we differ on, and I think that comes out in the survey. So, again, Sophie, I thank you for your time, and we definitely want to hear more from you guys and what you're doing in the future. And
mm,
I would be remiss because I know we spoke. You spoke earlier and a number of times in the program today about student debt. We have come out with a new book called The Student Debt Crisis. So please go to our website, the eduledger.com. And if you guys are interested in getting the book we just published on the student debt crisis, please do that. And we thank you all for your time this time.